What would it take to change the world? Provide food to the hungry and water to the thirsty. Teach children to read and keep them healthy. Shelter families and train a new generation. Give the poor a chance to better themselves. Create a worldwide network of peacemakers and conquer a disease that has killed or crippled millions. Could one person do it? What about 1.2 million?
My name is Frank Wessel.
Tamara DeWitt.
Gaston Cabat.
Xavier.
Eu sou Adélia Vilas.
Dr. Naresh Goyal.
Mon nom est Awa Omar.
Gary Parrish.
Warren Kaufman.
Lisa Simmons.
Eric Kimani.
Meu nome é Eduardo.
Singh Arora.
Megan Coutinho.
These men and women are changing the world. They're members of Rotary. Professionals and community leaders organized into more than 32,000 clubs worldwide. They volunteer at the local, regional, and international levels and dedicate themselves to a simple motto: service above self.
That's what Rotary is all about. Vision to see, faith to believe, and courage to act.
So many of us, we sit back and we go, gee, I'd really like to help somewhere in the world, but I don't know how to do it. And Rotary gives you all the tools you need.
Personalmente tengo.
Just the fact that you are a Rotarian opens doors all over the world.
For members of Rotary, no project is too big. Working with UNICEF, the World Health Organization, and the CDC, Rotary has immunized more than 2 billion children against polio and reduced the disease by more than 99% worldwide.
With not too many dollars, these Rotarians and our partners are doing a tremendous job, very effectively, very efficiently.
Rotary has spent more than $500 million on international scholarships and foreign exchange, while its graduate-level programs in conflict resolution train peacemakers from around the world.
When I started working for Interpol at the United Nations, I already had the background to understand international relations.
For Rotary members, the reward is immense and immediate.
Helping others is one of the things that they really enjoy. It makes my day.
The salary I receive spiritually is so huge that you cannot put a value on it.
Being a Rotarian is almost selfish. Yes, I help people, but I get so much in return.
When our world seems senseless and even hopeless, Rotary Club members of all races, colors, and creeds join together to care.
Hopefully we can bring some hope and some help, emotionally as well as physically.
To protect.
The job that is to be done can be done.
To connect.
But no one has a dry eye at the end of these projects because the kids will come back and ask for a picture with their doctor.
And to make a difference.
It is possible because we are Rotarians. We can do it. We should do it.
But even for 1.2 million volunteers, changing the world is no easy task. Learn how you can become involved.
It only takes a drop to make a river. And all we have to do is just make sure that we are in the right direction, we are committed to it, and it will get done.
Rotary International. Ordinary people working together to accomplish extraordinary things.
Welcome to Rotary. With your unique skills and perspective, you are joining a global network of problem solvers, drawn together by a desire to make a difference. Together, we can be bolder. When you share your ideas and connect with others, it's not just your community that benefits. You'll grow as a leader and feel a shared sense of purpose that comes from finding lasting solutions to big problems. Get involved in a way that's meaningful to you. Find a mentor. Sign up for a training. Volunteer in a service project. Or attend a global event. You are now connected to 1.2 million people of action who unite to create lasting change. across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. Welcome to Rotary.
For over 100 years, Rotary members have taken action when challenges arise. We know what people can do when they come together and put others before themselves.
The team lead said they will continue the campaign to fight against the coronavirus.
Local Rotary clubs deliver food and supplies to people in need.
Strangers become friends, helping hands multiply, and problems turn into solutions. We are Rotary. We are people of action. Learn more at rotary.org/action.
We are this close.
We are this close.
Urchick models.
This close to making history.
Of all Wantinti.
We are this close.
We are this close.
We're this close.
This close to changing the world. We are this close to making sure no child suffers a crippling disease ever again.
We are this close to making history.
We are this close to ending polio.
Because we are this close to ending polio.
We are this close to ending polio.
We are this close
to changing the world.
This close.
All we need is you.
Is you.
It's you.
Is you.
We are this close. This close.
Be a part of history at rotary.org/endpolio.
Every Rotary project anywhere in the world always started out with one person who had an idea. And then they were able to grow and develop that idea by getting other Rotarians engaged and using that powerful network of Rotary to really change the world.
I want to make a difference, and I see Rotary as being the best vehicle worldwide to be able to make a difference to the community as a citizen of the world.
It's always a blessing to give back what you have received. Rotary is just a sweet place to be. The fellowship, the ability to serve. It's not about how old you are or how much you have.
We don't have to be Prime Minister to lead our country. Even one Rotarian can do lots of things.
People want to feel involved, and that's how they feel that they're actually contributing and giving something back to the society.
Every Rotarian's needs are different. And if we don't know what their needs are, then how are we going to fulfill them?
Right after someone gets in Rotary, you have to start fostering the opportunity for them to take a leadership role, whether they choose to or whether the club chooses them to.
You know, leader is a role model of everybody.
If you've got the heart, you're going to take your club
forward in some fashion. And that's what it's really all about, all of us working together.
Teaching, leading, and then transferring the responsibility of what we are doing to them. The rewards are huge. The satisfaction's enormous. You know, I'm very proud to be a Rotarian.
Good afternoon, family of Rotary and guests, and welcome to today's session on infinite possibilities, diversity, equity, and inclusion, investing in equity. This series is presented by District 6960 and is co-sponsored by Rotary Zones 33 and 34. I'm Stephanie Urchick, Rotary International Director for Zones 33 and 34. And I am extremely proud of this membership initiative and the conversations that have been shared on the topic of DEI. Our team has produced multiple seminars highlighting phenomenal guest speakers, and we appreciate everyone's involvement. It's clear to us that in order to grow Rotary, we need to consider how important it is to reach all persons willing to serve their communities and join the greatest organization in the world, Rotary. It's my pleasure to introduce District 6960's District Governor, Darrell Keys. Darrell's vision for infinite possibilities has exceeded all of our expectations. And Darrell, we thank you. It's over to you.
Thank you, Rotary International Director Stephanie. And we'd like to welcome over 1,000 participants who have registered to join us today for another outstanding presentation about membership growth and retention in Rotary. Now, we have an amazing guest speaker today, but before I begin his introduction, I'd like to review a few ground rules in relation to asking questions, as we obviously anticipate quite a lot of questions today. Please go to the Q&A box, which you'll see below at the bottom in the center, and type in your questions. We have a Rotarian coordinating this process, and once our guest Xavier has completed his presentation, we'll begin that process of answering those questions. Please be patient, as we have an amazing number of registrations today, and we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can. Also, please feel free to share any comments you may have in the chat box, as we save this information for reference, as well as record each presentation, and we'll do our very best to respond to everyone in a timely fashion. I'm now extremely honored to introduce our guest speaker today, Xavier Ramey. Xavier has quite an impressive resume and background, and we're extremely fortunate to have him address our members and guests today. Xavier Ramey is the CEO of Justice Informed, a social impact consulting firm based in Chicago, Illinois. He is an award-winning social strategist, a noted public speaker, and conflict mediator. Combining his background in economics, extensive management and social impact experience, Xavier leads a company that brings a wealth of experience and network to clients seeking catalyzed strategies for inclusion, philanthropy, and community engagement. A native Chicagoan, Xavier has served as an advisor to Fortune 500 executives and has shared the stage with world leaders on the topic of global equity and change. Please join me in welcoming Xavier Ramey.
Thanks so much, Darrell. Everyone, welcome. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. To all my fellow Rotarians, I bring you greetings from the great city of Chicago, from the great township of Maywood Proviso, and from my Rotary Club of Maywood Proviso in District 6450. I'm really excited to be here because the topic is something that's very near and dear to my heart. It's something that I know is very near and dear to many Rotarians' hearts around the world. With 1.2 million members, it is imperative that we focus on the realities of what it means to be diverse. We have diversity, what it means to be inclusive, because we need to be so, and what it means to be equitable, because this is something that many people I find are challenged in their understanding of the difference of and the prioritization that equity has to have in our world. So I'm excited to bring this conversation here. I'm going to be talking a bit about what we call systems-focused DEI. Some people may look at it and consider it through the lens of individual, what we call representative diversity. So how do we get more people that look different or sound different or act different or otherwise are different into our clubs and into our organization? But before you can talk about bringing someone in, you have to understand what you're bringing them into. And in that, we find the nature of preparation being requisite to invitation. And so I'm hoping that you all take away a couple key points from this. I'm hoping that you leave with an understanding of why what happens outside your clubs matters so much inside your clubs, why the world around us and the things that we've all experienced, particularly in 2020, as we saw the entire world come to a standstill due to COVID-19, why the rise in challenges and fights around racial equality and equity in America launched a global ripple effect. These are things that no Rotary Club can ignore if they seek to engage the work of diversity, equity, inclusion. At the same time, I'm sure you all have seen the emails, you've seen the statements from Rotary International around diversity, equity, inclusion. I want you to know that those are things you should take seriously. I also want you to know that there's a need for more ambition around what we see and what we demand and what we need to truly be diverse, equitable, and inclusive. So I want to start with just giving a little bit of background. Some of y'all, a lot of y'all probably don't know who I am, but my name's Xavier Ramey, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of a social impact consulting firm based in Chicago, here in the United States. It's called Justice Informed. It's one of the few corporations across the United States that actually has the word justice in its title. Part of the reason for that is because my goal is to reshape what we mean when we say business. The world of business has not been very kind to people who look like me. The work of creating economic opportunities has often happened not because of people who look like me, but in spite of sometimes. And our work and our labor has often not been compensated, included, and our value has not always been seen. At the same time, I know this is the truth for many people around the world who are people of color. We seek to change the face of expertise, which is the mantra of Justice Informed. We look to change the face of expertise because we know that the experiences and the expertise and the values, the life experiences, the intentions and the goals of people who hold what I call minoritized and marginalized identities are not only valuable, they're necessary in the world. Some of you all may remember me from the Toronto convention, the RI convention in Toronto in 2018, where I took the stage and gave a speech that many have now called Making the Possible Probable, where I talked about the importance not of focusing on how our world can be more equal and make things possible for everyone, right? Equal opportunities for everyone is sometimes seen as the point of some folks' work around DEI. And I was positing that maybe it should be something different, something a little bit stronger, something that's not just about making things possible for people, but creating systems and relationships and networks and traditions and practices that make them probable. I brought up what it means to be in a country where the first Black president was elected in 2008, but it was always possible for a Black man to rise to the level of being a president of the United States. It was simply that for hundreds of years, we would have been harmed violently for even thinking such a thing. That is the reality. And businesses operated and went on with their business, and people volunteered, and people who look like me had no chance of rising to that level of leadership. We know that this has been the case in some Rotary districts where they've never had people of color. That's not accidental. These are things that we must face, and we must face them fearlessly. We must face them with relationships. We must face them with honesty. We must face them with the first of the four-way test. Is it the truth? We must face them. And not with the goal of making a high level of leadership possible, but creating systems and traditions and relationships where it's probable. So My experience in the US has colored the way that I see the world. I'm sure for many of you all, you've heard of the term unconscious bias. This is something that's necessary to understanding the work of creating diverse spaces. Unconscious bias means that you're just looking through the lens of how you've experienced the world. It's not a call out. It's simply locking into the neurological side of our mind, where we're constantly trying to get through things quickly. It creates things like expediency bias and what's called proximity bias and recency bias. There are many different types of bias. For those who may not know those words, I strongly encourage you to check them out, Google them. Know that there's a complexity in this field that I find often escapes the high level goals that people have of just coming together and being friends. The mechanics are a little bit more complex. But my identity created the urgency that I speak with. And I was fortunate enough to be born in the city of Chicago. It's the third largest city in America. And I was fortunate enough also to have a mom and a dad who truly, truly valued me, who truly understood what it meant to give a child hope in education, to make sure that he had discipline and make sure that he understood that he was somebody in the world, regardless of what the world might say about him. And I know that every child doesn't have that opportunity. And I always, I get really emotional whenever I think about how many Rotarians go around the world just to remind a child that they matter, who pick up and go into communities to make sure that people know, we see you, we're with you, you matter. As a child of philanthropy, years later, I just want to affirm you all in your work that you're doing in committing to service, that it really, really, really matters. And at the same time, it is what I would call good and insufficient work. Because what creates the need for service is often the work of equity. What creates the need for volunteering is often the realities of segregation, the lack of proximity that we have to one another, whether that be in the workplaces where our wages are created, or whether that be in our neighborhoods where the values of our homes become the largest asset for wealth accumulation. These are the reasons why we must create volunteer opportunities. And so we must remember what Dr. King said, that philanthropy is commendable, but it cannot confuse the philanthropists to distract them away from what created the need for the philanthropy. People know this when they're coming into your clubs. I hope y'all know this, right? People know the neighborhoods they live in. They know the cities they live in. And I've had so many conversations with Rotarians about how do we diversify our clubs? How do we change our clubs? How do we bring more people in? How do we increase membership? And I just want to just be very clear that people are aware that they're aware of the environment within a space and the questions they might have to deal with, or the microaggressions they might have to deal with, or the challenges they'll have to face, not because they want to serve, but because people have never been around people like them. That's real, y'all. That's blocking some of the progress that clubs are able to create. For some other people, it's simply because they lack diversity, because they might live in places that aren't terribly diverse, and that's not their fault, so to speak. But if there are practices and policies that create segregation, then that is their responsibility to address those things. But for some folks, for some clubs, diversity is hard just because the demographics around their neighborhood or around their city or around their township may not create a lot of opportunity, and that is real. But I want to circle back to this notion around how identity plays such an important role in it. For me, why I joined my Rotary Club? I joined my Rotary Club because an African-American man named Talay Thompson came up to me and he said, "Young brother, I need you in my club." That's 100% of how it started. I had heard of Rotary. I had never been to a Rotary Club. I'd never seen a Rotarian going out and serve that I recognized. I'd seen the shirts, but I didn't really connect the dots that this is an actual institution. These are people that are part of a movement. I didn't connect those dots until a Black man walked up to me and he said, "Hey, I see you, young brother, and I want you in my club." And he started coming in everywhere I was at. He was on my Facebook. He was, as soon as I gave him my phone number, he was texting me. The brother was relentless, and he still is. And I love that brother. And what he was cluing me into is something that I've also learned about Rotary. It's a lot of work being Black in Rotary. It's a lot of work. When I talk to my Latino and Latina and Latinx friends in Rotary, it's a lot of work for them to be in Rotary. It's a lot of work. And I'm not talking about the service. I'm talking about just being next to people who didn't know they weren't choosing you. The emotional labor that it takes to show up to meetings and hear things that you're like, I just don't want to spend the time to teach this person that that's not okay to say, or that doesn't make me feel included. The amount of work and labor that it takes, the stress that it puts on you, it just distracts you away from being able to serve. It distracts you away from being able to come in and just think about relationships and goodwill. It's an incredible deterrent. And it's why I'm excited to see an increase in demand for cross-cultural and cross-racial and cross-gender training across different Rotary clubs. But know that a lot of the solutions that are out there right now, they're primarily, as I've seen it, they're being created avoiding important conversations. Trainings that refuse to talk about why racism exists, but instead wants to talk about why we should just all get along. Conversations about gender that talk about the importance of women in clubs, but don't talk about the business connections of Rotary creating challenges for women to be able to pay their dues because they don't make as much money as men on average. Right? Like there's these things that are being avoided actively, and I'm saying that, I'm naming that, actively avoided. It makes it hard to stay in clubs. If you think that these things are not affecting your recruitment goals, know that, again, the thing that I started this with, it's not about who you want in. It's about what you're inviting them into. So I want to ask that question to everyone. What are you inviting people into? Not just to serve. What culture are you inviting people into? What practices are you inviting people into? I have on a suit jacket. When I went to Kenya, I was blown away by how many people were wearing suits, because I was like, but this is Africa. Why are there so many suits? And Britain, colonization. When I went to Uganda for several weeks, I went to a church there and I was like, well, everybody's in a suit. Why are there so many people in suits? Colonization. When I went down to Mexico, so many people speaking English is not a problem with that. People should be bilingual and trilingual and multilingual. But the question is, if they only spoke Spanish, would they still be competitive on the global stage, or do they have to learn English because we insist on it? This is stopping recruitment opportunities. This is creating tension and challenges in clubs. This is the reality. And those things must be faced, but they cannot be faced until they're named. And for years, my goal in Rotary, and when Talay Thompson approached me, he told me what his goal was. And when I talked to people like past District Governor Osei Hutchinson, when I talked to people like Lenore Sanchez, and I talk to my fellow Rotarians of color and I say, what do we need to do to change this? What can we do to push harder? What can we do to grow this? How do we dig in with our people? How do we dig in with people who want to serve with us, but might not necessarily want to live next to us? How do we dig in? What's the move? And I realized that all of us were committing to a type of labor and a type of endurance. And I want to call that out, a type of endurance, because it is endurance. To show up each week and be committed. To go through all that COVID was last year and to come out in 2021 and say, let's go back up that mountain. Let's get back out there and serve. Let's make sure that our programs are really tight. Let's make sure that our board is operating at a high level. Let's make sure that we're raising our dollars. Let's make sure that we're committed to our purpose. To do that while you're coming out of a year where, for instance, in the city of Chicago, the first 100 people to die of COVID-19 were all Black. And some people think that COVID-19 had nothing to do with race. Now, how do you have that conversation when only some of your members are having to bury their family? This is what I'm saying. These are DEI conversations. And I want to circle back because some folks might think that I'm talking politics right now. This is a diversity, equity, inclusion conversation. How can you include people who you don't understand are facing grave inequities as soon as they leave the club meeting every week? How can you include people? And so how will you have diversity? if you cannot include people because of the inequities they face. But if the mission of the organization of Rotary is to foster goodwill across the world, then how can we not face those inequities together? How? We must. We must. And I know some people may be feeling some tension, and I want to call out that tension, the tension that you might feel in your heart about this conversation. I want to invite you to a couple concepts. One of them is I want you to think about what it means to look through the mirror of the world, or the window of the world, sorry. To look through the window of the world. Imagine that we're all in a house together in different rooms, and some people are looking out the window and they're saying, my goodness, it's raining. Wow, look, the clouds are gathering. Oh, a car just went across the street. Now imagine that some of the rest of us are looking in the mirror, and we're realizing the effect that we have inside the house, not just what we see happening outside the house. We grow the ability to constantly face ourselves every day, to face what we like about ourselves, to face what we don't like about ourselves, to face what we've inherited from the past, from past generations of people that look like us or didn't, to face what we understand and what our ambitions are about the world and how that can create a problem for someone else. We face the mirror every day, but some people face the window. In order to truly change, to move towards equity, to understand the value of inclusion, to push for diversity, we need some of y'all to come away from the window. We need you to face the mirror. Come away from the mirror. Come away from the window, looking out at the world, looking at what's happening around the world, looking at what's happening in your city from a third person perspective, and face yourself first. When George Floyd was killed last year, it was one of the most important moments for equity in the history of the United States. George Floyd was a man who didn't have to die. He was in a situation I've been in myself. Face down on the ground, police officer leaning on your back. The difference was the officer didn't lean on my neck with his knee. But I've been there before. I know that feeling. I know how you can feel your heart beating against the concrete faster and faster and faster. I know what it feels like to have people watching you potentially die. And I know what it feels like to go into work the next day and to hear somebody talk about the importance of goodwill and relationships and how completely off that feels. How completely out of touch that feels. How I no longer want to be a part of this space because they don't actually see me. Not really. They don't actually see me. And George Floyd was an epiphany moment for a lot of people. Now think about what it means when the way that you wake up to the reality of racial harm that creates a lack of inclusion that happens because of structural inequities, the way that you wake up to racial harm being real requires the blood of another person being spilled. George Floyd was too high a cost for some people to learn about racism. Too high a cost. It should not have been an epiphany moment. The saving grace of that space, the saving grace of that moment, and the saving grace of his unintentional sacrifice was that it led some people to face their mirror, to step away from this and to face it here, to look at themselves and to truly consider, what does that have to do with me? And what about me can prevent that? When we saw workplaces around the US and around the world coming to a standstill, not just because of COVID, but because of people who said no, the emotional endurance that I have to engage to forget what happens to me outside just because I came inside to work is not sustainable. This company has to truly see me. It can't just want my production. It has to value me as a producer. That's inclusion. That's inclusion. That the realities of my 9 to 5, when I clock into work at 9 a.m. and leave at 5 p.m. are important, but they are affected by what happens in the 5 to 9. That is equity. Me just being there to be seen, to produce, and to be forgotten, that's diversity. This is why you have to have them together. So what is the role and the responsibility of people who are just waking up to things that have always been true? What's their job right now? We've heard these terms like privilege and unconscious bias, white supremacy. We've heard words like mansplaining, gender inequities, these sorts of things. So what's our job in the face of what has always been true? But for some of us, we've chosen to wait a little bit longer to learn. We didn't learn when Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson in the US. We didn't learn when the genocide was happening in China. We didn't learn, we didn't believe, we didn't accept when we saw what was happening in Libya. We didn't want to really see ourselves in that moment. We said we need a little bit more information. I need a couple more examples for me to get on board that this is a systemic issue and not just an exception. I need a little bit more pain. I need a little bit more violence before I agree that this should be urgent for me. Because that's what it sounds like to people like me when you don't believe, when you see Mike Brown in the street, or like today, March 26, 2021, 9 years ago, when Rakia Boyd was shot dead in Chicago, in my neighborhood. She was a neighbor of mine, by a police officer who was off duty, who had gotten a grant from taxpayers to buy a house in that neighborhood, and then killed one of my neighbors. And if you need more than that, I think that there's a different conversation that you should be having about what Rotary should be for you. Rotary should be a place that reminds you that there's no need for more epiphanies, no need for more violence to be your teacher. Believe it because it's always been true. Believe it because the people who survived it keep saying it's there. Believe it because history books have already written it. Believe it because it's on the news nearly every day. Believe it because the sociologists have already done all the data aggregation. They've already assembled all the white papers. The reports have all been written. Believe it because it's already true. Demand no more information for injustice. Demand no more examples of pain. Demand no more violence to be your teacher. And just say goodwill and friendship requires equity. It doesn't require more different people to be around me. It requires more different people to be able to survive even when they're not. That's equity. And it's not the same thing as equality. Equality means that we just act like all the past didn't happen and we try to start from ground zero here. It's when you hear people say, well, let's just think about the future. Let's just talk about the future. Let's just talk about the future. I can't escape my own past. I buried my father when I was 18 years old. He tried to start a company just like Justice Informed. It was a social impact consulting firm. And I can't escape the effect of all the contracts that those people didn't pay and the winters we went hungry. I can't escape that. That was my life. Just as I said from the stage in Toronto, my grandmother couldn't escape the fact that even though she was an ordained minister, people still called her the N-word. They didn't care. She couldn't escape that. You see, history is what created the opportunity for us. And as I said in Toronto, we're at the starting line for peace. We're at the starting line. There can be no reconciliation until there's acknowledgement. There can be no acknowledgement until there's the willingness to face what is there. And so DEI starts with facing your mirror. For me, as a cisgender heterosexual man, I must face my mirror. All the pain and all the challenges and all the violence that has happened in this world against women because of men. Was I there? No. Did I do it? No. Am I a part of what it takes to rebuild it? Absolutely. Does that mean that I have to know where my space, place, and opportunities are, where my voice can and should be heard in situations about life itself? Absolutely. Do I feel that that takes away the value of my life? Absolutely not. Do I feel that that diminishes me in being able to reach for the ambitions of my life, to make space for women? Absolutely not. As someone who's cisgender, do I feel that making space for people who are trans is an agenda or clouding my vision or distracting from the realities of racism because now we're talking about the gender spectrum? Absolutely not. You see, that's what it means to be able to actually share in relationship. It means that someone else showing up as who they are doesn't take away from who you are. I don't demand assimilation. I don't need my staff to come in with suits on. If they like to wear a suit, they can wear a suit. But I don't demand it. And for any client that says they must wear a suit, I'll say that's not what we do here. Let them express themselves however they want to speak. It's how I think about my family, how I think about my friends who have disabilities. I don't lose anything by loving someone for who they are. And loving them for who they are means more than just liking them. It means creating a lifestyle for myself that ensures their protection. Equity is an accountable relationship with other people, not just a present relationship. It's an accountable relationship. This is the conversation that I have not found in our Rotary clubs. And so when we talk about membership, when we talk about the value of difference, when we talk about the importance of diversity, when we talk about the realities of inclusion, when we talk about the value proposition for equity, when we talk about any of these things, know that people like me want a little bit more rigor in the conversation. We don't want the pace to be set at the comfort of those people who already have power. James Baldwin is a prolific, I call him a social scientist. He was an author and a speaker and an artist. He's one of my favorite social philosophers and scientists. He said at one point in one of his books, it is not permissible that the authors of devastation should also be innocent. It is the innocence which constitutes the crime. And what he meant by that was because he was prompted by people, why can't we just move forward? And he said, it's because you don't acknowledge that harm is real and has an effect today. So anything you plan for the future, by not including these variables, where harm has been specific against women, specific against LGBTQIA persons, specific against those who are poor, specific against those who are Black, specific against those who are brown, specific against those who have physical and invisible disabilities, where harm has been specific, the solution must be as well. But when you engage in specificity and strategy, people who've never been harmed often say, well, that's reverse racism. That's hating men. That's discrimination against people who don't have disability. How is it? And I'm saying that as someone who is able-bodied. I am saying that as someone who is not transgender, someone who is not LGBTQ. I'm saying that as someone who is 6'5" and has those privileges. I'm saying that as someone who speaks English like this. I'm saying that as someone who had all these opportunities, went to a great school, who has a great job. What is being taken from me by me having to make space for someone else? What am I losing? Nothing. So let the solution be specific because the harm was. Let the solution be specific. Set aside these budgets specifically to bring women in. Set aside these budgets specifically to ensure African Americans have a place in Rotary. Look at the grant frameworks to specifically address the political harm that people are experiencing in countries around the world. Let's be specific, y'all. Let's be specific for I was going to say just for a little bit, but I would rather it be for forever. Let's just be specific. Let's act like each one of us are individuals and not just say we're all part of the human race. So why don't you erase the fact that you have race when race has an effect on me as a human? This is what's stopping and dragging down our membership. The lack of complexity and nuance and rigor and mirror facing in our clubs. You want to raise your membership? You want to get people fired up about giving? See them as they are. Insist that they no longer endure what Baldwin later on went to say, that it is certain in any case that ignorance allied with power is the greatest threat that justice can ever have. I'm going to repeat that. Ignorance allied with power is the greatest threat that justice can ever have. So what does it mean when leaders are ignorant about the realities of racism, when they are ignorant about the realities of gender inequity, when they are ignorant about the realities of the Americans with Disabilities Act, when they're ignorant about the realities of global colonization and how that affected the places that we're trying to fly in some United flight to go serve in? You understand what I'm saying? Ignorance allied with power is the greatest threat. If you know you don't understand these issues, please step aside just a bit to make space for people who do, so that they can lead with a clear and full strategy that incorporates what Baldwin was saying when he said that the innocence constitutes the crime, that this type of pain, this type of hurt, these types of issues can happen throughout the world. And the pace goes at the pace of those people who say, well, I'm uncomfortable talking about that. Or the solutions are only allowing for ideas of people who don't want to necessarily make space for others very quickly. That's what's drawing down our membership. When I talk to some of the folks out in Thailand who are in Rotary clubs, when I talk to people down in the Rotary clubs down in the middle of Mexico, when I talk to folks in the Rotary clubs down in Nairobi, Nairobi's one of my favorite cities in the world. That's why I keep bringing up Kenya. Shout out to anybody from Kenya. When I talk to those folks, they're like, listen, the reality is a lot of who we are in our club as people of color, we talk about these things. We can deal with these things. But when we go up to the international level, we have to hide these things. You know, when we go and we talk about these types of issues, often we feel like people just focus on America and American issues, but the nuances of what's happening over here is different. But then when you go to some folks, you know, I've talked to some folks over in the UK and they say, well, you know, racism is an American thing. I said, well, how is racism an American thing? Y'all were part of the triangle trade. How is this an American thing? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, people don't even know their own histories or don't want to face their own mirrors or won't include people into their conversations, but they still want them to come inside. That is wrong. It also leads to attrition if you do manage to get them in. They won't stay for long. Face that. Face that. Face that. Where harm is specific, the solution must be as well. Diversity means that you invite me in the room. Inclusion means that I get to say a couple words. I get to hold the microphone. But equity means that what happens to me when I'm not here and what happens to me in here has to matter for you as well. It means that in order to be proximate to me, in order to be a friend to me, you have to take on the risk that I live every day because of my identity and how it's different from you. You have to see that as your view and lens on life. It means that your goal is not to absolve and absorb and dissolve the value of our differences. It's to learn to grow yourself by facing your mirror, to hold the tension of what we don't have in common. I have 2 rules for my friends. Anyone who ever wants to be a friend to me, there's only 2 rules. 1, you have to care for my very life. Care for my life. Don't just say, I love you, X. Oh, you're a great guy. Oh, he's bright. Don't say that. That's not being a friend. That's being an admirer. But a friend has to care for my life. And so where my life is threatened, I expect to see my friend standing with me. Where I say, ouch, I hope that my friends will stand there and say, what's wrong? My friends care for my life. The second rule is that they have to live their lives in such a way that they don't make any more work for me. Day in and day out, at Justice Informed, all we do is we hold people as they thrash into learning about people they didn't know they weren't choosing. We develop strategies for relationships in companies, create roadmaps for people to understand proximity in their workplace. I advise executives on how they should think about their financial operations in light of their human and their cultural challenges that they're experiencing in their companies. I talk with universities about how their curriculum has to be infused with more than just European philosophers. That people in Africa and Asia and South America and everywhere, they've been creating knowledge for generations, thousands of years, and that's being kept out of the academy. And so when you only teach what white people have produced, you make people assume that only white people are thinking. And I have value too. This is the work. This is the work, y'all. This is the work. And I am so thankful for all of you for stepping into this work, for considering this. I'm sure many of you all have questions. And I'm excited to join Daryl in answering those questions. So I want to thank you all, from my Rotary Club to yours. I want to thank you all from the city of Chicago. And I want to encourage you all as well, because if you're in this conversation, it means you care. Now what I need you to do is grow your skill level to actually finish the conversation and turn it into action. So thank you all so much. And Daryl, welcome you to join me in the questions.
Xavier, thank you so much for, I think the word that sort of comes out so strongly is that word powerful. That was a really powerful account of DEI and how it affects us all in our districts and also throughout the world. You'll be very interested to know that we did have somebody from Nairobi Club in Kenya.
Hey!
It was screaming with pride and joy, according to the chat box. So I think you might like that.
I lived right off of Gong Road for some time, so hey, I can't. I would love to come back to Nairobi as soon as this COVID stuff gets done.
Well, thank you for motivating us all. What a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
That was very, very powerful. Now, obviously, we've got quite a few questions that we want to try and run through. And so I'm going to open now the Q&A portion of this presentation. I'm going to pass over to Past District Governor Pete Dora to share these questions. Over to you, Pete.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I can't wait for the conversation around DEI to be more rigorous about race. And I also can't wait for it to expand beyond just race and gender. The other one that many clubs tend to latch onto is gender. There are far more ways to think about diversity outside of those two things, though those two things are incredibly important. And I'll say that for many people, my experience has been that Rotary often very much evades a real conversation around racial diversity. As it relates to those places that are in areas where there may not be much racial diversity. For instance, I'm in the state of Illinois. There are some townships in Illinois where there are Rotary clubs where you probably can't find 50 Black people. You can't find 50 Latinx people. It's predominantly white. And then there are some spaces where it's hard, they're predominantly Latinx communities, like the township of West Chicago is very much Latino, but it's got more diversity than I would say, overwhelmingly Latino. But for those types of organizations and spaces, it's actually a necessity that they understand just how broad this conversation is. There's no replacement for study. There's no replacement for what I would just say is doing your homework. There are so many books now on the work of DEI. There are so many TED Talks and speaker events and these sorts of things about ways to truly understand how to open this box up. I do a lot of this kind of discussions about opening the box of DEI up on LinkedIn. So if you all want to just follow that for ideas or such, we have a free resource on our Justice Informed website called the Spectrum of DEI Engagement. It's a way for organizations or clubs or otherwise to think about how to expand the conversation, but also see the work in totality rather than just like, we just need more diversity. We need more racial diversity, or we've got to recruit more people. It's bigger than that, y'all. So feel free to check that out on our website, justiceinformed.com, and just click on the services and DEI. You'll see the spectrum of engagement there. But that's one thing I would say is focus on your learning for sure. Focus on those conversations. And the final part of that is realize what you can and cannot accomplish. I think that people really beat themselves up sometimes because they want to be able to say certain things, right? We have 40% people of color in this club. They really want to be able to say that. But when they look outside, they're like, we don't have 40% people of color in this town, right? We don't have this. So how is this going to work? And that's why I'm saying Rotary has to have a more nuanced and rigorous definition of what alignment with DEI standards actually means. Because it doesn't make space for those types of clubs' realities.
What are you asking your club to do right now?
Well, our club right now is going through a general club survey, so a more refined one. It's been a pretty collaborative, fairly collaborative process. I think that another thing that we talked about, I remember this, was around dues structures. And timing. And so how do we create economic equity and respond to the realities of some people's, their finances are different. And so we've been advancing that conversation around scaled models for this and how do we phase this in while also looking at the reality of what our contributions to RI have to be, because that is a standard practice. And the timing of those things is also different as well. And so looking at the mechanics of financial equity side by side with the mechanics of how, our district and RI and other folks do expect certain percentages and such from us. But that's because we want to bring in, we want to have more economic diversity.
Okay, thank you. How do you respond to Rotarians who think sensitive topics like race and white privilege are too political?
Well, there's two words in there I'm going to pull out. One is sensitive, the other is political. So race is not political. Race is a fact. Negotiating race is political. Politics is simply the act of negotiating things on a legislative level. Race is a human rights and human life issue. It's not a political issue. How we negotiate the importance of race, or how we negotiate who from what racial background should get what and for what reason, that is political. The other thing I want to just pull out there is the word sensitive. I don't think that race is a sensitive topic. I think that many people are unprepared for the conversation due to what may be a lifetime of not addressing and dealing with their own mirror. It's only sensitive and it's only uncomfortable if you're unpracticed. So I would encourage more people to practice. I don't feel tension talking about race. And where I'm privileged, for instance, in my maleness, I don't feel tension talking about my maleness. I practice talking about it. And so I think that one, I just want to put this out there. And I know I said this in the Rotary International magazine article that was published in November. People have to start practicing. This is heart work. That is not necessarily hard work. This is heart work. And so I would encourage people who are engaging with folks who may not have done that heart work in facing their mirror and may see conversations about race as difficult, to encourage them to do their own learning, and to do that in ways that don't burden, but also don't minimize the realities that people of color in their club are expressing. And if that person who feels that it's sensitive or uncomfortable feels that they should still be able to have power to affect things that affect people of color, they might want to consider different leadership.
You said that it's a lot of work for you to be a member of Rotary. How can we as Rotarians help with that?
Everything that was just in the answer I just gave there, I think is a lot, is like 80% of it. So I, it's hard because, when I had articulated it, equity work and this stuff is hard work. But what we're constantly doing is we're introducing people who start to thrash, they resist, they fight, they deflect, they conflate, they thrash as they are learning about people that they didn't know they weren't really choosing. And what I mean by that is, I know there may be Rotarians out there. I know that, we had this issue, there was this issue down in Alabama here in the US around Rotarians who were, and past Rotarians who were saying overtly racist things. And I know that those things happen throughout the world. But the reality of what I've come to experience is that there are not many Rotarians who want to actively participate in racism, or who want to actively gaslight or wash over the lived experiences of people of color if they are white. What I have experienced, and this is why I say it makes it hard, is when people, Dr. King talked about the what he said was worse than the Ku Klux Klan, was actually the progressive white moderate, the person who thinks they're good. And that, it's sort of what I said earlier around, like, if you're willing to volunteer in a place that you'll vote against affordable housing in your own community against, then we shouldn't be talking about friendship and goodwill. We should be talking about the fact that, you want to be in relationship with people you won't be in solidarity with, right? Like, that makes it hard. That makes it hard to stay in a club, especially as many clubs, if they're not diverse, that means that and Rotary is historically white. You're talking about a group of majority white persons who may be asking to take their time getting serious about issues that you have not one day of space to be free from as a Black person or a brown person. Like, I have to deal with it. If someone wants to be my friend and they say they want to take their time dealing with it, and then we both want to come together in the same club, then that means I'm enduring that person. They may not see it as that way, but I certainly see it as that way. And until they get urgent about it, I wouldn't call them friend. I just say they're a club member who's a member with me. And that's the endurance thing. So if I was on the other side of that, I would be saying to myself, how do I speed up my ability to learn? But how do I also not make learning the work? How do I not make just reading I read an article, or I saw I heard this podcast, or I looked at the documentary 13th, and that's supposed to be the work. No. Rewrite the policies in the club, change how you vote, make my life matter in this world, not just make my presence known in your club.
In your view, is fixing Rotary worth?
Ooh, that's the last question. Wow. That's a big question. That's a big question. Wow. Whoever wrote that question, thank you for asking that. Because at the core of everything I just said, at the core of all this talk around diversity, inclusion, and membership is this question of, should this thing be in the world? And that's the question. I've thought long and hard about whether it would just be better to not endure and not fight and not have to engage with some of the things that I have. And quite honestly, I'm just going to be transparent. I'm at a really hard point right now with Rotary. I've not been to many of my club meetings. I've not been talking to a lot of my fellow Rotarians because I'm struggling with that question. I'm just being honest, y'all. I'm struggling with that question because for 2 years, I've been fighting really, really hard and spending dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of hours trying to push within Rotary for real acknowledgement, because there is acknowledgement, but I mean like acknowledgement that I would be like, yeah, that feels real. That matters. I see me in that statement. And I just haven't seen it. And it's challenged me in my thoughts. And I know I'm not alone in that. My text message threads are full of Black and brown Rotarians. Last night there was a meeting with a bunch of folks across the zones of just Black and brown Rotarians about this. Should Rotary exist? Should we invest in Rotary, or should we build something else? Right? I've taken the stance that for the last 2 years, I've taken the stance that it is important and valuable and necessary to create an invitation before you demand a replacement, to invite people to come higher, to invite people to be true, to invite people to not center their comfort, but instead focus on others who have a lack of safety. I've seen moderate growth in that, but that growth has moved at the pace of white fragility. it is what it is. It's not my pace that this organization moves at, and it's also everyone's pace to set. But I think the consensus that I've seen and the challenges that I've heard from my fellow people of color especially is that at its core, Rotary, I've heard this directly from Rotarians, they don't want to move as fast as you want to move, Xavier. They don't. So you're going to have to make a decision, just like all of the other ones who are still here and those who left have. I think it should still exist. I think that the invitation has been made, and I think that the invitation is clear. And I think that if the invitation is not accepted in real ways, that Rotary should consider what the future has for it, and that people should consider where their time is best used. That is my answer.
Xavier, thank you so much for your candor. We certainly have more questions than we have time to give you. And so I'm going to turn our program over now to Rotary International Director Peter Kyle.
Thank you, Pete. These seminars have been designed to introduce you to a great organization represented by incredible speakers such as we've heard today. But Rotarians are people of action, and we also want you to take action. So we'd like to suggest the following. Please take note of the contact information on each of the following slides. First, please contact past District Governor Pete Dora to find out more information about the Rotary Action Group, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. This action group is in the process of being created, and we're looking for great, passionate people to be involved. Second, as part of this series, we're also supporting Zones 33, 34 Rotary Works Initiative, which is a new initiative started by Rotary International Director Stephanie Urchick to help Rotarians and Rotaractors experiencing career transition. Please contact information the contact information can be seen on your screen. Third, if you're not yet a Rotarian, please contact past District Governor Cindy Dora or reach out to a local Rotary Club to find out more. We need you. But more importantly, your communities need you. And fourthly, let's all strive to do more. Let's lean in and step up to leadership positions. Your clubs and your communities need you. Now, here to tell you more about next month's Infinite Possibility series is our chair, Cindy Dora.
Thank you so much, Peter. Xavier, I don't have enough words to say how dynamic and inspiring and motivational and heartwarming and actually challenging your words were to so many of us today. As we followed the chat box and the questions and the notifications we were receiving on Facebook and I was receiving on WhatsApp from Rotarians around the world, the power in your presentation today made an amazing impact on all of us, and we cannot thank you enough. On behalf of District Governor Darrell Keys from District 6960 and our international directors, Stephanie Urchick and Peter Kyle, we cannot thank you enough for being with us today. You have just filled a void that we knew was very necessary in our conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and powerful, powerful. We hate to wrap it up, but we're out of time. We ask everyone to please go online and register for our final series in DEI, which is going to be held on April the 30th. April 30th, we actually have our own Rotary International president, Holger Knack. Holger's going to be with us, and we're going to celebrate our diversity. We're going to celebrate the good news, and we're going to share the powerful impact that we know we can make as Rotarians in the lives of so many. We truly, sincerely want our clubs to mirror our communities. That's what it's all about. Yes, we're all different, but we're the same. Let's embrace that. Let's acknowledge that And let's let everyone know that we want to open our doors and we want everyone with a heart of service to join us in Rotary. So please be sure to go online. Please be sure to register for our next series on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And again, know that this series was recorded. So you can go to the website that was referenced in the chat box. I hope those of you that are able to just save it, go to that and you can use it as a club presentation, a club program. And I'm sure our directors will want to use this to really educate and inform so many of our members. So again, on behalf of District 6960 and the entire team of Infinite Possibilities, I thank you for joining us today. And I hope that you will ponder this and discuss this and share this with your members. We wish you all the best, and we look forward to seeing you on April 30th. Have a great day and a wonderful weekend. Goodbye now.